The road was empty, stretching endlessly into the darkness. The only sound was the steady hum of the engine and the rhythmic thump of the tires against the cracked asphalt. Ethan checked his phone. No signal, he sighed, gripping the wheel tighter. The gas station attendant had warned him about taking this road so late at night. It's not safe, the old man had muttered, eyes wary. People go missing out there. Ethan had laughed it off. He had driven through worse. But now, as the trees pressed in on either side of the narrow road and the headlights illuminated nothing but fog and shadows, he regretted not listening. Then he saw it. A figure standing by the side of the road. A woman. She was barefoot, wearing a pale dress that fluttered in the wind. Her hair hung in tangled strands over her face. She didn't wave for help. She just stood there, staring. Ethan's stomach tightened. He slowed the car, debating whether to stop. He glanced in the rearview mirror. No cars behind him. No sign of life for miles. When he looked back at the road, she was gone. His foot slammed on the brakes. His heart pounded as he scanned the empty road. No sign of her. Just the whispering wind and the endless dark. He exhaled sharply. You're imagining things. You're just tired. Shaking his head, he pressed the gas and kept driving. But as the miles passed, an uneasy feeling settled in his gut. Then, the car radio crackled to life. Static. He hadn't turned it on. He reached for the dial to switch it off, but before he could, a voice whispered through the static. Don't look in the mirror! Ethan's blood ran cold. The voice was barely audible, distorted and hollow. A woman's voice. His hands tightened on the wheel. He didn't want to look, but something inside him, some terrible, irresistible force, made him glance at the rearview mirror. She was there, sitting in the back seat. Her face was pale, eyes hollow. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, slowly, her head tilted to the side, her mouth stretching into a grotesque smile. Ethan swerved, nearly losing control of the car. He slammed on the brakes, panting, his hands shaking violently. The back seat was empty. Heart hammering, he threw the car into drive and sped forward. He had to get out of here, but the road stretched on, endless and unfamiliar. He checked the dashboard. The gas gauge was dropping, faster than it should. Within minutes, the needle was on empty. The engine sputtered. The car rolled to a stop. Ethan cursed under his breath. He grabbed his phone, no signal. He was stranded. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. The wind had died. The trees stood still. Even the crickets had gone quiet. Then he heard it. A soft rustling in the trees, footsteps, coming closer. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He turned his head slowly toward the sound, and saw her, standing at the edge of the trees, watching. His pulse pounded. "Who are you?" he shouted. She didn't answer. She stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the pavement. Ethan scrambled for the door handle, yanking it open. He stumbled out, backing away from the car. "Stay back!" She kept coming. Her eyes were wrong, black pits, empty and endless. Ethan turned and ran. He didn't know where he was going. The road was empty, the night stretching in all directions. But he ran, lungs burning, legs screaming in protest. Then he heard it. A whisper. Right in his ear. "You shouldn't have looked." A cold hand clamped down on his shoulder. Ethan screamed. And everything went black. When he woke up, the sun was rising. The road was empty. His car was gone. His phone lay on the ground beside him, screen cracked. He picked it up, hands trembling, and turned it on. A single message flashed on the screen. A photo of him, asleep in the back seat of his car, and in the front seat, looking into the mirror, was the woman, smiling. Ethan's breath came in short, panicked gasps as he stared at the photo. His mind screamed that this wasn't possible. He had been alone. He had seen her, in the mirror, in the trees, but she had never been in the car with him. His hands shook as he scrolled through his phone, looking for more photos, for anything that would explain this nightmare. But there was nothing else. Just that single, impossible image. His car was gone. The road stretched ahead, empty and endless. His phone still had no signal. The silence around him was unnatural. No birds, no insects, just dead, suffocating stillness. Ethan forced himself to his feet. His body ached like he had run for hours. He looked around, hoping to see headlights in the distance, a gas station, a house, anything. Nothing. Just the road, the trees, and the vast emptiness. Then, footsteps. Soft, slow, deliberate, coming from behind him. Ethan's entire body went rigid. He didn't turn around. Every instinct screamed at him not to look. The voice from the radio whispered in his mind, "Don't look in the mirror." His breathing became shallow. He knew. He knew she was behind him, watching, waiting. He clenched his fists and forced himself to move. Step by step, he walked forward, ignoring the approaching footsteps, ignoring the ice-cold breath he could almost feel on the back of his neck. The steps grew louder, closer. Ethan's vision blurred with panic. He wanted to run, but something told him if he did, if he gave in to fear, she would take him. Then the footsteps stopped. The air around him felt heavier, like the entire world was holding its breath. Then, a voice. Soft, amused, almost, "You can't leave, Ethan." His stomach twisted into knots. She knew his name. His body screamed for him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The air was thick, suffocating, pressing down on him like invisible hands. And then he heard something else. A faint hum. A car. Ethan snapped out of his trance. He turned toward the sound, toward safety, toward another human being. As soon as he moved, the temperature around him plummeted. Fingers brushed his shoulder. Cold, brittle, wrong. He lunged forward, breaking free, sprinting toward the approaching vehicle. The headlights cut through the fog, blinding him. He stumbled onto the road, waving his arms frantically. "Stop! Please!" The car screeched to a halt. The driver, a middle-aged man with wide, alarmed eyes, jumped out. "Jesus Christ, kid! What the hell are you doing out here?" Ethan collapsed, gasping for breath. "Please, help me. She's out here." The man looked around, frowning. "Who? There's nobody here." Ethan turned. The road was empty. No footprints, no shadows, no sign that anyone else had been there. His head throbbed. His heart pounded. He wanted to scream that she had been there, that she had touched him, whispered to him. But there was nothing. The driver hesitated, then helped Ethan up. "You look like hell. Come on, let's get you out of here." Ethan didn't argue. He climbed into the car, his entire body trembling. The man pulled back onto the road. "How the hell did you end up out here, kid?" Ethan swallowed, staring at the dark trees rushing past. I was driving. My car ran out of gas." The man glanced at him. "What car?" Ethan turned sharply. "What do you mean?" The man sighed. "I've been driving this road for hours. You're the first person I've seen. And there's no car. Not anywhere." Ethan's stomach dropped. No, that wasn't possible. His car had been here. He had driven here. He reached for his phone, pulling up the photo. It was gone. His entire gallery was empty. His throat tightened. His pulse roared in his ears. The driver noticed his reaction. "Hey, you all right?" Ethan couldn't answer. He just stared at the empty screen. She had taken it. The man sighed. "You must have hit your head or something. We'll get you to town. Get you checked out." Ethan nodded numbly. He wanted to believe it. He wanted to believe that he had imagined it all. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the rearview mirror, and reflected in the back seat, she was sitting there, smiling. Ethan's body went rigid. His breath hitched as his eyes locked onto the rearview mirror. She was there, sitting perfectly still in the back seat, her pale face expressionless. Her lips curled into a slow, knowing smile, her hollow eyes staring at him through the mirror. No, this isn't real." Ethan clenched his fists, willing himself to breathe, to stay calm. The driver didn't react. He didn't see her. "Hey, you all right?" the man asked, glancing at him. Ethan forced himself to nod, his voice trapped in his throat. He couldn't speak. He couldn't warn him. The air in the car turned ice cold. The windows fogged slightly, the temperature plummeting. Ethan's fingers trembled as he reached for the door handle. He had to get out. But before he could move, she did. Slowly, methodically, she lifted her hand and placed it gently on the driver's shoulder. The man flinched, shivering. "Damn, it just got freezing in here," he muttered, rubbing his arms. "You feel that?" Ethan's pulse pounded. She's touching him. She's real. The driver frowned, adjusting the rearview mirror. Ethan watched in horror as his expression slowly changed. First confusion, then disbelief, then terror. The car swerved violently. The driver screamed. Ethan barely had time to react before the vehicle spun out of control. The world blurred, headlights flashing, tires screeching, metal crunching, then blackness. When Ethan opened his eyes, he was lying on his back. The night sky stretched above him, dark and infinite. The smell of gasoline and burnt rubber filled the air. Pain radiated through his body, but he was alive. He turned his head. The car was a crumpled wreck, smoke rising from the engine. The driver? Ethan forced himself up, wincing. The man was slumped over the steering wheel, motionless. Blood trickled down his temple. Ethan crawled toward him. Hey, hey, wake up! He shook him desperately, but the man didn't move. A soft whisper drifted through the air. Ethan froze. His breath came in short, sharp gasps. Slowly, he turned his head. She was standing by the wreckage, still, silent, watching. The wind howled through the trees, but she didn't move. Then, with agonizing slowness, she raised her hand and pointed at him. Ethan's chest tightened. He staggered to his feet, backing away. Please, please just let me go. Her head tilted, as if considering his plea. Then, for the first time, she spoke. You should have never looked. A sudden, unbearable weight crashed down on him. His vision blurred, his knees buckled. The world twisted around him, pulling him down into the abyss. Days later, when emergency responders found the wreckage, they recovered only one body, the driver. There was no sign of Ethan, no footprints leading away from the crash, no evidence that anyone else had been in the car. Only his phone was found, lying in the dirt beside the road. The screen was cracked, and on it was a single photo, a picture of Ethan sitting in the back seat of the wrecked car. And in the front seat, she was smiling.